Alright, Tyler, thanks for the incredibly complicated topic of talking about recording and production. Oh, here we go.
Oh, the Nerd Fighters!
So while this is a topic I would consider myself fairly knowledgeable in, it is also one that's really hard to get into without having too much technical jargon that's going to bog this thing down and get you all just ultimately incredibly confused by everything I'm about to say. So I'll try to just hit the basics. Niall, since you know what I'm talking about, don't kill me for giving kind of poor analogies, because I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible for the civilians. So here we go, on recording and production. Yay. I'll skip a lot of the stuff that can be incredibly boring, such as microphone cables and different kinds of microphone cables and which kind's better than which, and preamps and all of your inputs, your outputs, your, let's see, you've got your signal flow. There's just all that stuff that matters, but I'm just going to skip over that and get to the basics. And I guess the first thing to you is the microphone. And this is just my Blue Yeti, a really good quality but cheap, USB microphone. There are three main kinds of microphones. There's condenser, dynamic, and ribbon. Think of it this way. A dynamic powers itself. A condenser requires electricity, and a ribbon powers itself, but is very, very fragile, and you should not touch them. There are all kinds of different patterns on microphones, such as cardioid, omnidirectional, bidirectional, supercardioid, hypercardioid. It gets really important, but essentially all those are just varying degrees of how directional the microphone is, meaning if it's cardioid, it's pointed mostly in one direction. If it's supercardioid, it's more pointed. Hypercardioid, even more. A shotgun mic would be considered a very directional microphone. It's going to be hypercardioid, pointed in one direction, and it's not going to catch much sound from around it. Omnidirectional, everywhere, bidirectional, forward and back, etc. This has all of the capabilities except for getting super directional. The microphone plays a big part in the sound you're capturing, and so does the preamp. But I'll skip over the preamps and just go straight into, now let's say your audio has been recorded, and we'll talk about the post-production side of things. Okay, with post-production, you're going to have it in nowadays you have digital music and you have analog recording. I prefer digital because it is more hi-fi. It does sound better. There are arguments that analog sounds better, but it really just sounds differently. You can't say one really sounds better than the other, especially now that digital has the capability to record at ridiculous sample rates, which is, you know how video works, certain number of pictures in a matter of seconds? Well, audio works like that, except super speed. You have to capture thousands and thousands and thousands of little pictures of the sound wave to be able to accurately recreate it. But let's just go ahead. It's in digital audio, and now you pull it into your post-production software. Now, I am partial to Pro Tools. Not because it's the easiest or best, but because it's the industry standard and I know it pretty well. You have other things like, let's see, Logic, and this is the Pro Tools, but this is Logic. A lot of people like Logic over Pro Tools. There are a million different other programs, but Logic and Pro Tools are really the two most famous, but Pro Tools racks up a good 90% of the use. Now, this is what audio looks like once it's been, put into your program. And you have a bunch of different options that you can do with it here. This is just a porch session. Part 1 has been bounced and uploaded onto the internet now, but we have parts 2 and 3 still to do. But I'll just show you some basic things here. All right, over here you have your tracks. All right, you see there's Drew's microphone, Grace's, the guitar direct, electric, all that, blah, 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 blah. What you can do in post-production audio, you have your compression. Now, your compression, when you're playing the audio, you got your woman and you got your so this one here, you see that?
Okay, so what we have here is that you have this audio that's just happening. Compression takes it, and if it gets really loud at parts and really quiet at parts, the compression is going to take those really loud parts and kind of push them down. The audio is going to try to come up, and the compression is going to say, no, hold on, we don't need to get too loud right here. And it just gives everything a nice level kind of volume sounding. So the loud parts will be a little bit quieter, but the quieter parts will also seem, if not actually be, a little bit louder. And that's the essentials of compression for you civilians. You have EQ. This is a one-band EQ. I'm just cutting out the lows from about 80 hertz down. That's all the low rumble, so there won't be any whoa, 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 picked up in the microphone. Anything really low, like if wind blows and hits the microphone, that high-pass filter, which is what that's called when you let all the highs pass but you block off all the lows, that high-pass filter will get rid of a lot of that low rumble. But a more complicated EQ would be here, this channel strip that I'm using. I can grab each individual frequency, I can change it, I can change the width of that, and I can just control what frequencies get boosted, what frequencies get pulled down, and essentially control what sounds I want to hear. Now the trick with EQ is if you don't know what you're doing, don't touch it, because you will ruin audio much faster than you will improve it. And then we have like your de-esser here. A lot of people have these S's, and it sounds really bad. It's called sibilance. And what this does is you set it to a particular frequency. Most sibilance happens around 5,500 kilohertz, or no, I should say 5,500 hertz, which is 5.5 kilohertz. And you set the threshold, and when there's an S, if it goes above the threshold, here, let's see if I can't find a little moment. Alright, so you heard when she said whiskey, she had that little bit of S. It went past my threshold, and boom, it compressed just that frequency, that S sound, and it's called a de-esser. It gets rid of those nasty S sounds. And then, of course, you have your master, which allows you to do some major compression over the entire thing, which this is essentially EQ, but it's a compression style EQ, which is basically all EQ is. But this, basically, I go from having waveforms that do all kinds of crazy things, and then I smush them and make them really loud with the mastering part of things, which is a win and a lose, depending on what you believe. You have your reverbs. I like to use air reverb. It's very basic. It's pretty simple. Reverb, a lot of people think of it as like echo, because you can make something sound. A lot of reverb, it's everywhere. I can increase the time of the reverb. It sounds terrible. But reverb isn't just used. Reverb isn't just used to create that echo kind of effect. Reverb also is used just to create distance, really. By putting just a little bit of reverb, and I mean just a little bit of reverb, what it does is it takes it in that vocal, instead of it sounding like that vocal is happening inside my head, it backs it off and makes it sound like it's coming from a little farther away. It's less harsh, it fits better in the mix, and it just sounds better when it doesn't sound like it's coming from the middle of your head, but sounds like someone's actually singing to you in the room. But that's honestly, that's the basics of it. There's so much more to it. There's the mixing it, the levels, getting everything right. But that's it. You record your audio with your microphones, using your preamps and everything, and your cables, and then you get in and you use your EQ, you use your compression, you use your reverbs, and whatever else effect you might want to use, and you mix your music. It sounds really simplistic the way I've described it, but I promise you it's taken me about 6 years to get to where I am now, and I still would want to train under a master for about a year before I felt comfortable going out and doing this on my own in a professional setting. So I know this has ended up being probably a really long video. I'll try to edit it a little bit well. But Tyler, you told me to do something about recording and production. That's the basics of it. Obviously, I don't have time to take you to the studio finals week, but maybe eventually on my own channel, I'll record some time when I'm in the studio with a band and show you some miking techniques and how to get the best sound. Ultimately, the biggest philosophy in recording is the better the sound you capture, the better it's going to sound, period. You know, though the Mythbusters did prove that you can polish a turd, in audio, you can't polish a turd. If you give me bad audio, there's only so much I can do to improve it. You give me good audio, I can make it great audio. See what I'm saying? That's the essentials. I hope you nerdfighters weren't too bored by this, but Tyler, you say, and I do. DFTBA.
I swear I must confess.